So before we get started, I just want to draw your attention to my title, Actor Care Specialist, and what that means. As an actor care specialist, I'm focused on exploring the trauma narrative of a fictional character while keeping the actor's mental health a priority. The methods I use are influenced by my training as a psychotherapist, but I'm not a qualified psychotherapist and I'm not doing psychotherapy. I provide safeguards and support the actor's resilience and capacity to hold a character's emotional pain so they can return to themselves with reduced risk of being triggered or having emotional lingerings. If they are in need of therapy, I will certainly signpost them if they're not already in therapy. So with that, I would like to start with an artistic version of me being frustrated about what I could never figure out. Now, as a young actor, early in my varied career, I could never understand why some actors could not be in touch with their emotions. What was it that made them avoid their feelings and pretend they were feeling instead of actually feeling it, or not feeling it at all? I was guilty of the same thing as a young actor, but I preferred to project it onto other actors than to own it. That was back then. Flash forward 40 years later, having worked with hundreds of actors over the years as a director, acting coach, instructor, it always still played in the back of my mind this question. Why is it so hard for some actors to be emotionally authentic? And how can they achieve it in performance? The answer to this question is what led to the cornerstones of the ACES model, which is what I'm presenting today. But first, just a little bit more about me. I trained as a psychotherapist. This is my fantasy version of me as a therapist in training. Of course, that is the wonderful Mads Mikkelsen in Hannibal. I trained as a psychotherapist for 6 years, which included 3 years as a placement therapist. I saw clients with CPTSD, anxiety, and depression. I earned 5 certificates in 4 different modalities, one of which was TSM, psychodrama. That's experiential trauma therapy. In fact, the ACES model is inspired by TSM. It was during my TSM training that I had an aha moment. Actually, I had 3 aha moments, and I will share all of them with you today. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with TSM, it stands for the Therapeutic Spiral Model, which is a clinical form of psychodrama for healing trauma specifically. This is the TSIRA map, which stands for the Trauma Survivor's Internal Role Atom. Now, to explain this in very basic terms, the stick figures you see here represent participants in a therapy group and the inner voices of the person doing the work. Briefly, on the left side of the map is where the protagonist or the client starts. They gain support through embodying strengths or qualities that help them by role reversing with them. And now what I mean by role reversing is perspective shifting and taking on a different perspective and then shifting back or role reversing to return to themselves while others in the group now hold those perspectives and are ready to support when needed. So this helps the protagonist manage when they start exploring their trauma without shutting down or dissociating. Then they move into the trauma triangle here in the center of the map, where they face their inner roles represented by people in the group. So we have the victim child, wounded child, abandoning authority, the perpetrator. And what happens here is the protagonist comes to understand through the group process the trauma narrative that's playing out in their own lives. This can be quite challenging emotionally, hence the support of the strengths here at the beginning. Now, the final stage is to develop post-traumatic growth roles, but my ACES model stops short of that because I'm not healing trauma. It's here in the trauma triangle that I had my first aha moment, which was I realized that not only has a majority of the world's population suffered trauma, every character that's worth watching on stage or screen has also experienced trauma, and that influences their behavior. Uncovering the character's trauma narrative, those conflicting inner voices here in the trauma triangle, creates dimension and emotional depth for the actor to use. So even if it's not in the story, it can still be used as part of their narrative, as the backstory, motivating the character's behavior and how they relate to other characters. So when I understood how the trauma triangle could be used in an acting context, And having read several studies on the impact of portraying emotionally challenging characters on the actor's mental health, it just made sense that in order to explore the trauma narrative with an actor, I needed something like a Tessera map, so they don't retreat from their authentic feelings or get lost in their fictional characters. So I came up with 4 cornerstones to support the actor. And that's what I'm going to introduce to you today. Because of time, I won't tell you how I use them, but why I use them. The 4 cornerstones of ACEs. ACEs, by the way, stands for Actualizing Characters by Expanding Self-Awareness. The 4 cornerstones are resilience, boundaries, defense management, and self-reflection. Now, when all 4 cornerstones have been tended to, the actor feels safe and empowered and more in control of their vulnerability, because these cornerstones give them the tools to return to themselves. As a result, they can portray emotionally robust and layered characters that engages audiences because they are authentic, in the moment, and true to the actor's voice. Now I'll expand on each of these cornerstones. Resilience. The greater the level of vulnerability, the more strength required to achieve it. Now that's a quote from Danielle Sloveniak-Ha, who is she's actually a writer and actor in Canada. She's also a researcher, and she wrote a book called Fiction's Truth, which was a study that was published that involved 20 actors. And in this study, it revealed, among other things, that actors found support in thinking about acting as occurring in a safe, sacred space outside the everyday realm. This idea allowed actors in her study to feel freer and better able to cope with a range of emotions they engaged with through their characters, especially when they were representing unethical individuals or perpetrators of violence. The ACEs cornerstone of resilience engages the actor's personal strengths, grounds them, and creates a safe space before they begin exploring the emotional distress of a character. Similar to Bowlby's attachment theory, fundamental to healthy attachment is feeling safe. ACEs creates safety within the actor by having them role reverse, or perspective take, and embody strength-based roles. This empowers them to feel their own agency and help them bounce back. And we all know the stories in Hollywood, some tragic, of actors struggling to bounce back from characters they've portrayed. So, returning to my question I asked earlier about why some actors can't be emotionally authentic, I have the beginnings of an answer, which is my aha moment number 2. So, authenticity is linked to our ability to be grounded and connected to ourselves. And if the actor is not grounded, not only is their authenticity compromised, they also may not feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, they won't explore as deeply a character's inner life because they don't trust themselves to come back in one piece. So grounding them in strengths helps. Cornerstone number 2. Boundaries. The actor does not create a role in a vacuum, but brings his or her own personal history, emotions, memories, and drives into the role. That's a quote from Therese Hanna and others from the Journal of Research of Personality. One of the pathways to maintaining the actor's well-being is to keep their past and present separate from the character they are creating. Before the actor can be in character, and in order for the actor to step out of character cleanly and decisively, the actor must have a starting point where they end and the character begins. And when they finish a performance, where the character ends and the actor begins. In acting terms, it's the warm-up and the cool-down. So referring back to Sloveniak-Ha's study, which, by the way, I don't know if I actually gave her a really good billing, but she's a researcher as well. I think she did her PhD. I'm really building her up. Sloveniak-Ha, she found that out of the 20 professional actors interviewed, all of them experienced either long-term or short-term lingerings that were categorized as either physical, mental, or emotional, or all 3. And they range from intense to subtle. So the more intense ones have been linked to an insufficient cooling down process. So another reason for boundary creation. Cornerstone number 3. Defense management. Trauma is that scarring that makes you less flexible, more rigid, less feeling, and more defended. Now that's a quote from Gabor Mate from the documentary Wisdom of Trauma. Defense management refers to the actor who is feeling blocked emotionally or is easily overwhelmed by their feelings. Either will disconnect the actor from their character. In my own practical research, I found that this disconnection has to do with the actor's own personal defenses, but it's under the guise of the character that we can work on the defense and later reflect on it as a possible similarity to themselves. It becomes part of the next cornerstone of self-reflection. So communicating with the defense in character is a safe way to manage it. Make friends with it, appreciate its presence, and ask if it's okay for it to step aside, and welcome it back should it need to protect. So always respecting the defense and recognizing its importance in the development of the character. Now, back to those actors I referred to previously, the emotionally inauthentic ones. I had jotted down a half-baked theory years ago about why they didn't use their true self in their acting. And this is a continuation of the answer to my question about why they couldn't be authentic. So the theory went something like this. The experience of emotionally connecting to oneself feels foreign, strange, uncomfortable, even unreal. These actors prefer to produce artificial tears and use visual gimmicks rather than connect to real emotion. They have a preconceived idea of what the character should be and strive to meet that idea, which further separates them from their own emotions. The result is a desensitized representation of a person. They act in a vacuum and cannot connect to the other actors, let alone themselves. Now, what I didn't realize at the time, and what I understand now, and this is where my third aha moment happened. After being on the front lines as a psychotherapist in training, I realized this half-baked theory I described is the effect of trauma on human functioning. It's quite possible, though I couldn't prove it then, that those actors were protecting themselves from their own past trauma through the fight, flight, or freeze responses. As much as they may have wanted to use themselves in the role, they may have been blocked by their own defenses, knowingly or unknowingly. The cornerstone of defense management offers the opportunity to open that door where all the protected emotions are. Opening it is like revealing a buried treasure to the actor. When they begin to embody emotional experiences in character, it's amazing. The spontaneity that happens in their characterizations, the richness, the nuances, the layers of emotion, it's incredibly rewarding for the actor and ultimately their audience. And most importantly, they feel safe doing it. And these are actual clients, by the way. Images used with permission, of course. The final cornerstone, self-reflection. The more actors know themselves and are grounded by that knowing, the more their strength builds. This then allows actors to become more vulnerable, bringing new depth and complexity to their work. Again, that's Daniel Sloveniak-Ha. ACEs encourages the actor to reflect on their own lives and reasons for playing a role as part of the process of character development. At every step, there's opportunity to reflect on similarities and differences and who they are as artists and people. This is how they get that grounded in that knowing that Sloveniak-Ha is referring to in her quote. Self-reflection is the key to the ACEs model. Creating a space that considers the actor's feelings and their mental health and performance is a rarity. Though of late, therapists on set or on standby have been introduced on some productions, should the actor or crew get triggered. But not every actor wants to talk to a therapist, and the therapist is not integrated into the creative process like the ACEs model is. I've been working with the ACEs model now for over a year with groups and in one-to-ones, and the testimonials speak for themselves. The one thing that is consistently proving itself is that developing characters using trauma-informed model is not only having a noticeable impact on performance, but all four cornerstones of ACEs have a powerful positive influence on the actor's process and their mental health. So, back to the question of those actors who couldn't be emotionally authentic, and I put my younger actor self in that category. If I had the opportunity today to offer the ACEs model to those actors, maybe their testimonials would be here too. I know my younger actor self would thank me. Thank you for your time.